I'm delighted to have here a good friend of mine and also a colleague and researcher, Dr. Cristina Huertas, who's going to be presenting today educational technology and pluriliteracies applied to bilingual education, a step further from the CLIL approach. Welcome, Cristina. I'm going to be presenting you right now. Cristina Huertas is an associate professor of education at the University of Córdoba in Spain. Her research interests include computer-assisted language learning called Bilingual Education, teaching English as a foreign language, and teacher training. She has participated in several national and international research projects and published numerous scientific articles in prestigious journals. Huertas teaches at master's levels at Universidad de Córdoba and UCA in Spain and the Ateneum-University in Gdansk, Poland. She has taught both informal and non-formal contents and has directed and taught several specialization courses on bilingual education, translation studies, and second language acquisition, presenting around the world in Spain, Germany, Poland, France, Turkey, and Bahrain, among others. Huertas has had in 10 national academic stays in Chile and in the US. She is also a member of the research group Researching Bilingual and Intercultural Education and the co-founder of the Ibero-American Research Network on Bilingual and Intercultural Education. It is a distinct honor to present to all of you my good friend, Cristina Huertas. Welcome, Cristina. I'm very happy that you're with us.
Thank you very much, Jorge. It's my pleasure. It's my honor to be here with you. Thank you for your very, very kind presentation, as always. It's always a pleasure to be in Texas somehow, even though physically, that I love TWU. So, it's my pleasure to be here and trying to share, different approach to bilingual education to what you usually have there in the US, because the European approach is different because our context is different. So I would like to to share some ideas and of course to try to have a kind of discussion or debate at the end of the session in order to to exchange ideas and why not to create even new networks.
We know that we like that. We know that I like. So for all our guests today and people entering into the platform right now, please you know that you can submit your questions to the chat and also through the Q&A, and the questions will be answered at the end of Cristina's presentation. Thank you very much, and Cristina, the scenario is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Please, if you can confirm that you can see it properly.
Yes.
Yes, great. Great. Thank you very much. Well, as Professor Figueroa has said, as my friend Jorge has said, the title of this presentation is Educational Technology and Pluriliteracies Applied to Bilingual Education, a step further from the CLIL approach. But before we start, let me introduce myself a little bit. As Professor Figueroa has said, I'm an associate professor in the Department of English and German Philologies at the University of Córdoba. And I mainly teach EFL for primary education, EFL for early childhood education, early second language acquisition, and my research interests are connected to these fields, but mainly focusing on educational technology, call and tell, and teacher training. Okay. And also regarding my context, okay, I belong to the University of Córdoba, that is in Spain. More specifically in the south of Spain, but unfortunately without beaches. So we have the heat, but not the sea. But well, so it's important this because in the presentation that we will have today, I would like to talk a little bit about bilingual education in Spain that of course is conditioned somehow by the European contexts, especially considering the CLIL approach. And, there are some differences regarding, education, bilingual education, especially if we compare it to the US, okay, as we will see in a while. So first, if we focus on bilingual education in my country, first we need to consider the status of foreign language education. The first foreign language that is mainly English, like 90% of the students, is compulsory from primary education, even though there are other options, like, for example, French or German, but English is, the most frequent first foreign language. And the second foreign language, depending on the region, tends to be French. Okay, so the main languages that are taught as foreign languages in Spain are English, French, and German. Okay, and the first contact with these foreign languages, mainly, as I said, with English, takes place in early childhood education. That is mainly when pupils are 4-5 years old. Okay, why is this important? Because even though Spanish is the most common language in Spain, there's linguistic diversity, okay, and there are several co-official languages in Spain, okay, because we have Galician, Basque, and Catalan, apart from Spanish as co-official languages in Spain, okay. However, when we, the reality is that there are also some dialects or minority languages, okay, as you can see here, in the screen, okay. And for example, the case of Andaluz Gibraltareño, that is in this part, is because of the contact with Gibraltar. So the importance of English and the mixture there is quite interesting. Okay, it's a kind of continuous translanguage in there. But when we speak about bilingual education, we could think about Spanish plus another official language, but the reality is that it's mainly Spanish plus a foreign language, and as I said, mainly English. So even though the tendency is this, there are differences depending on the region, and in fact, the first approaches to bilingual education in Spain took place in the 1990s, okay, and especially in the city of Madrid, the capital of the country. And the initiative included kindergarten, primary education, and secondary education. Okay, and this was supported by the British Council and the Spanish Ministry of Education. But if you remember the map, okay, in my case, my city is in this region marked in red, that is Andalusia. And the bilingual project there was different, okay? And we had our own, as you can see here, own plurilingualism promotion plan, okay? In Spanish, Plan de Fomento del Plurilingüismo, that started officially in 2005, okay? And it aimed at helping Andalusian citizens to develop the right to acquire language skills as part of a lifelong process according to their needs, aiming at improving skills, linguistic skills, in both first and second language, and later a third language, as I said, the second foreign language, okay? And it included kindergarten when possible, depending on the human resources of the school, but also primary and secondary, okay? And the main approach was CLIL, okay? The European approach to bilingual education that I will present in a, a little bit more detail, in this presentation, okay? And as I said, not only English, also French and German, but the reality is that most bilingual schools had the first foreign language with English. Okay. This is representative because, as I said, Madrid, that you can see here, was the first community and the first city with proper bilingual education with foreign languages in Spain. Okay, but as you can see, the number of bilingual students in Spain in 2011 in Andalusia was much higher than in the case of Madrid. And if you compare to the rest of autonomous communities, it was, quite relevant in the Spanish context. Okay, even though, as I said, it was the Andalusian own plurilingualism plan. Okay, in contrast with others that were more supported by the Spanish Ministry of Education. Okay, and you can see the exponential growth of bilingual students in Andalusia since the beginning of the plan in 2008 till the most recent figures in the academic year 2015-2016. Okay. In 2016, a new plan was developed that was the strategic plan for the development of languages in Andalusia. That this was a kind of continuation of the plurilingualism promotion plan. Okay. In this case, the main objectives were to implement a second foreign language in primary education, because before this plan, this second foreign language took place mainly in secondary education. And in general, it is mainly L1 Spanish, L2 English, and L3 French. Although we can find other combinations with L1 Spanish, but L2, for example, French, German, Portuguese in some cases, and L3, we can have other languages as, for example, Chinese in some schools, schools and high schools. Okay. Of course, the development of strategies to foster lifelong language learning, to create networks, to develop Erasmus Plus initiatives. I will go back to this with a specific initiative that I would like to mention. And in general, to improve the training processes of language and content teachers. Okay, why? Because language and content teachers working together are the pillars, the fundamentals for bilingual education. Okay, and the number of students, bilingual students.
Excuse me, Cristina. Yes. The slides are not moving. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's remember it's a PDF, so you need to click, there we go, on the top. All right, okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I mean, well, I have some graphs, I didn't know that, but well, simply, well, saying, I'm going to show only the pictures, okay? This is Europe, this is Spain, and in Spain, this is the, can you see now the slides moving? Okay, I had the full screen. So
yes,
in my case,
we're fine, we're fine. We're fine okay. Now. There you go.
So okay, so I will use, if you don't mind, the slide like this, okay, instead of the full screen. Okay, so yeah, I was saying that, well, the linguistic diversity that I mentioned, you can see the regions marked here in the colors, and also some dialects, okay? But what is important here is the region, okay? And the figures. Can you see it on the graphs? Now, yes. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, sorry for that. I mean, my slides were changing, so I thought that you could see them. Okay, so, well, you can see here the figures regarding the number of bilingual students in Spain in 2011, just 3 years after the implementation of the plurilingualism project in my region. Okay, this is my region, the last one. Okay, and if you compare it, it is much bigger than any other region in Spain in terms of bilingual students. Okay, and this was the progression. Okay, that you can see that the number of bilingual students increased quite a lot in a short period of time. Okay, and I was here with the strategic plan for the development of languages in Andalusia. Okay, This is regarding the languages that I mentioned, and the support of lifelong language learning and Erasmus Plus initiatives, that is European initiatives, and in general the importance of improving the training processes of language and content teachers. Okay, and as I said, the number of bilingual students increased, and of course also the number of bilingual schools increased quite a lot in the period 2008 to 2016. Okay, but there are some needs. Okay, mainly the need to transform the traditional way of teaching into new methodologies like project-based learning, cooperative learning, the use of CLIL, okay, attention to diversity, of course, teacher training, a good linguistic competence in the target language, and good digital competence, further cooperation among teachers from different schools, from different nationalities, also collaboration between teacher training institutions like the Faculty of Education, for example, and schools and high schools. Okay, also the need of teaching resources, because it's not always easy to find good CLIL materials, good bilingual education materials for all the subjects. The need to improve the implementation of the communicative approach and a better identification of needs. Okay, so now the situation is that we use the CLIL approach, but what is CLIL? Well, CLIL is the European approach to bilingual education. Okay, CLIL corresponds to the term content and language integrated learning. Okay, that is a term used especially in Europe, okay, for different forms of bilingual education, where an additional language, that the reality is that in most cases is English, is used as the language of instruction in non-language school subjects. Okay, but the difference here to other approaches, or to, for example, the idea of English as a medium of instruction, is that it has a dual focus of teaching both the subject, the content, and the language together. Okay, and this way the subject matter determines what language will be learned, and the language introduced serves to allow students to learn and communicate about that subject. Okay, so to simplify this idea, this is that with CLIL, students learn the content through the foreign language in most of the cases. Okay, and at the same time they learn the language, okay, while learning the content. Okay, so it's a combination. That's why the idea of the dual focus. Okay, and when talking about CLIL, COIL established the idea of the 4 C's. Okay, that's these are the 4 pillars of CLIL, that are content, as we mentioned before, okay, but also communication, cognition, and in the center of everything, the importance of culture. Okay, as you can see here. So CLIL cannot be understood without these 4 axes. Okay, and as you can see, these connect to learning theories, to language learning theories, and intercultural learning. Okay, and Meyer, based on the 4 C's, identified the core elements of CLIL. Okay, first, that the input must be authentic, meaningful, and challenging for students. Okay, that tasks should support higher order thinking, student interaction, authentic communication, okay, and subject specific study skills, okay, because it's not the same, for example, the skills needed for learning, for example, maths, okay, than, for example, learning history. Okay, and also regarding the output, okay, it moves to cross-cultural communication, and then fluency, accuracy, complexity, okay, and from basic communicative skills to academic language, okay, the specific language, the specific terminology that is used in a specific content. Okay, considering, the requirements of the different contents. Okay. To pluriliteracies. So now the idea is that, okay, CLIL is well established, is the European approach for bilingual education, okay, but we need to go a step further, okay, and this step further can be done with pluriliteracies, the pluriliteracies approach, okay. That's as Meyer stated in 2015, okay, this approach acknowledges that learning a subject is not simply learning the content, okay, but is something that is more a developmental activity, okay. So learning a subject is not simply reciting facts, repeating facts, okay, but the idea is that we need to foster our learners' conceptual understanding, okay, and this way they can develop transferable skills, okay, and new ways of thinking that can be applicable to other contexts, okay. So it's not only repeating the contents in any language, okay, but also this is more connected to transferable skills to other contexts and to deepen the conceptual understanding of both the content and the language, okay. Why? Because helping our students become pluriliterate, okay, that's as it is connected to CLIL, it means that is acquiring subject literacy in more than one language, okay, will help them to construct and communicate knowledge purposefully and successfully across languages and cultures, okay, and preparing them, for living and working in the so-called knowledge age, okay, as you can see here in the screen, okay. If you remember the diagram of the forces by COIL regarding CLIL, okay, here with the pluriliteracies approach, we still have the culture, the content, okay, the cognition by the conceptualization, okay, and also communication, okay, but it goes, as I said, a step further because it also includes these specific literacies for a specific content, for a specific subject or course, okay, and with the additional skill of this idea of purposeful communication, okay, across and through languages and cultures, okay, always, of course, considering the different styles, the different registers, the different modes, okay, and following the different gender conventions that a specific subject area may need, okay. And this approach is important because, as Meyer said, language is essential, okay, to develop and increase conceptual understanding, okay. So this focus on language is what can help teachers to foster this deeper learning, okay, that he defines as the ability to take what was learned in one situation and apply it to another, okay. So this deeper learning helps, this idea of shared learning, interactivity, communication, exchanges, creation of networks and synergies, between, students, also teachers and students, teacher trainers. And the idea is that this way, with the pluriliteracies approach, learners can develop expertise in particular subjects and master their unique ways of creating and sharing knowledge, okay. So this idea of pluriliteracies emphasizes much more the part of cognition that the CLIL approach has, okay. And this diagram can explain the idea of pluriliteracies, that is, arguing science, doing science, organizing and transmitting scientific information and explaining this. So this way we can go deeper in the learning process, and also promoting critical thinking, resilience, and other skills that are necessary for our 21st century students. And how do we integrate educational technologies in this? Well, of course, we have many resources. We have live video streaming, as we are having now. We have podcasting, we have video games, we have interactive whiteboards, we have augmented reality, virtual reality. We have, many options. But the reality is that in many cases, we have limited resources. And in the case of having limited resources, what we have is creativity. Okay, so if we have limited resources, we can try to be creative to bridge this gap and to integrate educational technologies in order to support this approach based on pluriliteracies. And I would like to connect this to an European initiative that I think is very interesting in terms of, helping students develop this critical thinking, this international cooperation, collaboration, that is the initiative of e-twinning. Okay, and because this was an European initiative that was at first thought mainly for schools, okay, with the idea of helping different schools and high schools collaborate, communicate, develop projects, share, okay, and be part of a learning community in Europe. Okay, you can see here in the image a map with all the countries that currently participate in this initiative. And why is this interesting? Because there is also a part that is for pre-service teachers. Okay, so it's not only for in-service teachers, but also for pre-service. Okay, and this allows that European teachers can be connected, can create networks, okay, at all educational stages, and in some cases also the collaboration between different stages, as it would be the case of pre-service and in-service teachers, okay, fostering plurilingual and multicultural telecollaboration. And I would like to present shortly an example that I have seen my partner, Dr. Musinska here, who helped me develop this project, in March 2020. It was a very, clear example of this collaboration between pre-service teachers in Spain and in Poland about using technology to learn English, but also to teach English. As you can see, this is a platform, okay, where you can share resources, exchange ideas, and many members can participate. Okay, in our case, we were two teachers, Dr. Musinska and myself, but we had 102 students who participated, collaborating, exchanging ideas, and exchanging resources and creating networks about how to teach, how to help autonomous learning of, in this case, English as a foreign language. Okay, so they had to prepare a pre-task to be familiar with the platform, about our context, about Wrocław and about Córdoba. And then what is more important, they prepared several resources that they exchange here about, as you can see here, English language techniques for self-study, English language teaching methods and approaches, online tools for young learners, and also for self-study. Okay. And at this very moment, I am also initiating a new e-twinning project in which also several countries are involved. In this case, this is a little bit more ambitious because we aim at connecting teacher trainers, in-service teachers, and pre-service teachers in order to create a collaborative project, well, telecollaborative project on the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is connected to bilingual education in the cases, for example, all the things connected to science and the content and everything about the SDGs, using English as the language of communication, okay, in order to create short films about the different goals to raise awareness on the importance of the 2030 agenda, but also to promote intercultural communication among the teachers participating in the project, but also among the students, who will be mainly primary education students from different countries that are not English-speaking countries, but they will use English as the language to communicate, to collaborate, and to create these short videos on the SDGs. So in order to attach myself to time that Professor Figueroa told me about, 40 minutes more or less, I would like to talk about some challenges and opportunities. Well, of course, we have the opportunity of internationalization, the internationalization of education. And this webinar is a clear example of this. I am in Spain. I'm currently, in Europe, it's 7:30 p.m. It's 12:30 there, but we are sharing this space together, and we will have the opportunity to discuss ideas and to present a different way of of teaching, of researching from a different perspective, because we live in different contexts with different needs. Also, we have the continuous challenge of teachers' lifelong learning. And when I say teachers, I include myself, of course, in here. This process of lifelong learning, of learning from others, or having the opportunity of, as I said before, creating networks. I think that this is essential in our society. Connected to that, of course, the importance of digital literacy. Okay, the importance of developing teachers' digital competence, because these initiatives, as for example the case of e-twinning or the case of this webinar, are not possible without a minimum digital literacy. Of course, teachers' linguistic competence. This is a challenge, especially because in the past it was not so easy to communicate with speakers of other languages, but nowadays with the internet, with mobilities, even with virtual mobilities that are quite trendy at the moment, we have the possibility of improving our skills, and this way improve the quality of education in our students. Also, the challenge of facilities and infrastructures. As I said before, in some cases the resources are limited, but well, we can try to be creative and try to create opportunities even though we don't have many resources. Of course, human resources are essential, and in this case, I would like to emphasize again the importance of collaboration, the importance of exchanging good practices, okay? Because this way we can also improve what happens in our context by learning from what others do in other contexts. Okay. There's a huge need nowadays of special needs and attention to diversity. And this type of collaboration can also help us to do our best and to include students that may need special needs, that of course they are diverse. We have multicultural and diverse classrooms, and we need to adapt ourselves to these situations. And in these contexts, of course, technology can also help us. And because of the pandemic, we have also the situation of emergency remote teaching. In my personal case, emergency remote language teaching. And because the world has changed, and the situation we are living has demonstrated us that it's essential to be flexible, to adapt ourselves to new challenges, but also to create opportunities from these challenges. So, it's important to adapt ourselves, and these skills that I said before, like, for example, resilience is very important in the situation that we are living nowadays. Okay, and of course, I would like to finish this presentation with this quotation of something that Nelson Mandela said regarding education, that is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. Okay, so thank you very much. And please, if you have some comments or questions, I would be more than happy to try to answer them, or in English or in Spanish. So thank you very much. Shall I stop sharing my screen, Jorge?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. I don't know if anyone from the audience have questions for for Dr. Huertas.
I don't know if you have some questions or comments. I would like to use this panel to, why not? Because I think that, and also Professor Musinska, that is here, say hello to her. No, I mean, the Ateneum initiative is a very successful initiative in Europe, and I don't think that you have something similar in your context, Jorge. But even though we don't have the same infrastructure, we may think, why not, with our expertise from Europe, to try to create something similar? Why not, to exchange ideas and research and create little projects with pre-service teachers, in-service teachers, using a kind of more or less simple platform. I mean, we don't need to have something very complicated, but try to create mini projects to create a kind of bridge between pre-service teachers here, pre-service teachers there, and to discuss, different possibilities, things that work.
Of course, you know that our the policy of our dean specifically is that we start always with a yes, and that is a yes, of course. So definitely we're going to, of course, we can look into it and look for opportunities. There's a comment from our my colleague and friend, the Associate Dean for Education Preparation Partnerships there, Dr. Gina Anderson, for you. I appreciated hearing your presentation. Cristina, we're so lucky to work with you, and Barbara. There you go. Barbara also get the kudos.
Thank you, Gina. I mean, it's my pleasure to read you. I mean, I would really love to be there, and I hope that I can have the opportunity to visit you soon.
Yeah, but definitely those are things that we can do, and that we can work together. You know that we've been successful working together, not only in you know, helping you out specifically in other projects as well, and Erasmus Plus grant, but definitely mini projects where we can contribute and interchange research and scholarship between our faculty and students. You know, there's a comment over there for you, Cristina. Look at that.
Yeah, please include speech language pathologists. I would love to collaborate in the realm of early language development. Language is our game, especially if we can work in a trip to Spain. Well, if you want to visit us, you know, here you have your your home, so you will be more than welcome if you want to pay a visit. It would be my pleasure and my honor to receive you here. Uh, we had, I mean, the Texas Women's University and the University of Córdoba have a certain tradition of collaboration. We have, so why not including speech language pathologists? Of course, everybody
Uh,
is welcome here.
and look who's giving you already a comment over there. You know this name, Lisa Hoffman. There's a
Oh,
comment from
hello,
Lisa Hoffman
Lisa.
there. She says in the Q&A, if you go to the Q&A, you're gonna see it
Yeah,
as well.
I can see her comment. Yeah, Lisa. I mean, I think that's as I said, the A20 initiative is a European initiative that is supported by the European Commission, but technically it's not something very complicated, because we can have something similar platform like Moodle or something like that, and in order to you know, to have our students working together, you know, developing their intercultural skills and working together, exchanging practices, and as I said, I think that technically is not something very complicated, and we can have like mini projects, something that is not very ambitious, but can, you know, can help in both directions, you know, to learn from others. I think that's this is essential.